Coming up on Lawmakers, a controversial bill that opponents say would allow the state to spend taxpayer dollars in secret stalls in the Senate. A House committee sets the stage for the incorporation of Sandy Springs, and a senator talks of dividing Fulton County in two. And a statewide smoking ban passes out of the House Health and Human Services Committee. Those stories and more are next.
Live from Atlanta, this is Lawmakers for Thursday, February 24th. Here are your anchors, Nwandi Lawson and Gerald Bryant.
Good evening, everyone. Also on tonight's program, the Senate agrees to House changes to legislation creating Georgia's Master Teacher Program. That bill heads to Governor Sonny Perdue.
And a Senate committee approves a measure that would require companies to contact consumers if their personal information is compromised. But our top story tonight, a controversial bill stalls in the state Senate. Legislation that would keep negotiations between public officials and the private sector confidential during business negotiations was tabled in the Senate today after an hour of debate on the floor. David Zelski joins us live from the Capitol with the details. David.
Well, Gerald, House Bill 218 has been heavily criticized by some of the media. Many who say this bill would simply keep the public from asking questions about government projects. Proponents of the bill, however, believe these claims are off base. Senate Economic Development Chair Jeff Mullis says Georgia is one of only 2 states east of the Mississippi River that doesn't have this kind of law.
In fact, Florida, their confidentiality is behind closed doors for 10 years. Some states are forever. But Georgia was just until the negotiations have been done.
I understand. 2 amendments were offered at the beginning of the debate, one taking local governments off the bill, and the other striking private deals involving developments like major power plants, hazardous waste sites, and other environmental concerns.
The local papers are against it, or because the papers have generated public opposition to it.
The Georgia Press Association, made up primarily of print media, sent a letter to the Senate this morning, agreeing that these amendments did close some loopholes and called them a reasonable compromise. But Senate Minority Leader Robert Brown felt differently.
This bill is like kissing a pig. You can put lipstick on the lips of a pig, but it's still a pig. And I don't think the people of Georgia are ready to kiss a pig like this bill.
There's some companies that won't even negotiate with Georgia because of the mere negotiation becomes public. And we're one of the only a couple of states in our region that have that situation. So there's no way to put a dollar figure on it, although there are specific cases that could be mentioned if that were possible. So over the next couple of days, the Press Association is supposed to let members know that they're mostly in favor of this bill, and hopefully it'll be voted out of the Senate in days to come.
Now, even though the Georgia Press Association said the amendments were a fair compromise, the letter also stated they still did not like the idea of private business negotiations. Senator Mullis could bring House Bill 218 back to the floor as soon as tomorrow or whenever he believes he has the votes necessary to pass this legislation. Reporting live, I'm David Zelski for Lawmakers.
Thank you very much, David.
The Senate today agreed to House changes to Senate Bill 34, creating a Master Teacher Certification Program. The second of Governor Sonny Perdue's education initiatives to make it through both houses. The measure awaits only the governor's signature to become law. Earlier in the House, some who voted for the bill yesterday were speaking out against an amendment by Representative Earl Earhart to provide teachers with liability insurance. Opponents of that change say that they were never given the chance to debate its implications before Senate Bill 34 was brought to the House floor. Here's Representative Mike Jacobs.
This amendment puts the state in the position of providing free liability insurance to any teacher who incurs civil liability in his or her job. Now that sounds good on its face. And that liability insurance must cover that teacher, the word is shall, must cover that teacher under any circumstance related to his or her duties. So, if a teacher incurs civil liability as a result of a criminal act, including but not limited to child molestation, the state is in the position of having to provide that teacher with with liability insurance to cover that teacher. And that is bad public policy, my friends.
Well, this afternoon in the Senate, Democrats trying to have the Earhart Teacher Liability Insurance Amendment declared not germane to Senate Bill 34, meaning the amendment is not relevant to the underlying bill. Senate President Pro Tem Eric Johnson said the Earhart Amendment was germane. Education Committee Chairman Senator Dan Moody urged the Senate to agree with House changes to the legislation.
This legislation is the governor's bill that will put Georgia in first place in recognizing and incenting our teachers to help improve student achievement. The legislative process continues to work well, and this is another example of how the Senate and the House came together in a bipartisan effort to address an opportunity to help our teachers that are on the front line in the classroom day in and day out. Through the efforts of the House Education Committee, and especially Representative Alicia Thomas Morgan, we now have a better bill to send to the governor for his signature.
Senator Steve Thompson said he agreed with the intent of the bill, but said current law was even better and that Senate Bill 34 would weaken standards for teachers.
What we're doing is we're taking a program, which is a good idea, as you have the Academic Coach program, listed with people who are going to make up the rules that we don't even have yet to provide incentives for teachers. Well, that's fine. But to do that, we're taking away the National Certification Program, which has been very successful, whose standards are higher than they are in Georgia. And I want to remind you that we're behind nationally. And that's the reason we ought to go to national standards so that teachers can become nationally certified. And we're taking away that incentive. Fine, add this one, but don't take the other one out.
Ultimately, the Senate voted 38-14 to agree to the House substitute to Senate Bill 34. It goes to Governor Perdue for his signature.
Well, today the House Governmental Affairs Committee heard arguments over the proposed incorporation of Sandy Springs. House Bill 37 would allow for a referendum to create what could be Georgia's 7th largest city. Lawmakers Jesse Freeman has more. Jesse.
When the committee did not vote on House Bill 37 or 36, which contains enabling legislation to allow for the creation of Sandy Springs. The bill's sponsor, Representative Wendell Willard, says there are still some small details to work out, including some very important financial allocations. For a solid hour today, the committee heard arguments for and against the incorporation of Sandy Springs. Many area residents are passionate about the issue.
It is time for the people of Sandy Springs to be able to determine their own destiny.
Much of the resistance comes from the city of Atlanta and Fulton County.
Cities do what cities do, and let county government do what county government is supposed to do.
Much of the debate centers around how sales tax revenue would be shared and who will take the largest financial hit.
It is not reasonable to expect that if our services do not change, because we're not losing any population, that our local option sales taxes should go down.
Senator Sam Zamarripa has a bill of his own that he believes may ease that financial burden. It would call for a statewide referendum that would create 2 counties of present Fulton County. The northern part will be called Milton and would contain Sandy Springs.
This is no small governance matter. It is no small public policy matter. And I think this issue has gotten the public's attention in a positive way. And for the record, let me say that I plan to vote for and support the Sandy Springs Amendment as long as it remains revenue neutral to the city of Atlanta.
Zamarripa says the idea is in its initial stages, but it could quickly gain support.
I have not seen this bill, but for 20-25 years, I have been a proponent of one city within Fulton County because there's so much duplication.
Now, Senator Zamarripa's legislation has just been filed today, so I got very little feedback from the groups involved as to how they might view it. Since adding a new county is proposed, it would take a 2/3 majority in both houses to create the constitutional question for voters to decide on the November ballot in '06. Reporting live, I'm Jesse Freeman for Lawmakers.
Now, Jesse, before you go, last week we heard that there would most likely be a vote today. So how much is there still to be worked out on this?
Well, Committee Chairman Austin Scott said he intends to try again next week and maybe take a vote Tuesday or Wednesday.
All right, Jesse, thank you so much.
Meanwhile, a bill that requires consumers to be notified if their personal or financial information is stolen passed the Senate Agricultural and Consumer Affairs Committee today. Senator Bill Hamrick sponsors the bill.
We would like to provide some protection to consumers in Georgia, and that's what we're trying to do. That's the goal of this legislation. The way we got to this point was that we in the process of responding to some requests to look into it, we looked at the California law, which is a notification law that California had passed several years ago that would require companies, when this happens, to notify the people whose information had been obtained.
Senate Bill 230 comes in response to the theft of identity information from ChoicePoint, an Alpharetta-based company.
Recent reports in the news have told us that a fraud ring has stolen the personal and financial information of as many as 145,000 consumers from computer databases maintained by this company called ChoicePoint, which is based in Alpharetta. And we think that this problem has underscored the need for tougher safeguards against identity theft.
And Senate Bill 230 now moves to Senate rules.
Well, along the same line, State Insurance Commissioner John Oxendine today placed ChoicePoint on probation, which could lead the Alpharetta-based company to being banned from the Georgia insurance industry. The terms of the probation require ChoicePoint to notify consumers when there are security breaches, establish a website, dedicate phone number and public service announcements, and hire an independent security firm to perform a system-wide audit. If ChoicePoint does not comply, Oxendine says the company will be prohibited from providing information for underwriting and pricing insurance policies.
Those supporting and opposing a bill that would ban smoking in most public facilities made their voices heard today at the House Health and Human Services Committee. The Senate passed their version of the bill yesterday, but the House's version remains in committee. Lawmakers Chris Knight joins us live with more. Chris.
Gerald, while the House Health and Human Services Committee did not vote on House Bill 426 today, they did hear testimony on both sides of the bill. There was much discussion but no vote today from the House Health and Human Services Committee on House Bill 426, a bill that would ban smoking in almost all public facilities.
Before the committee meeting, I had several people voice concerns, especially on how the bill was going to be enacted and the penalties that would ensue on private businesses and the effect the bill would have on private businesses. Because as it's written, it would basically close down places like cigar bars.
The committee room was packed full of those supporting and opposing the bill, wanting to get their voices heard.
I urge you and I plead with you to consider all of the people who have no choice but to be exposed to secondhand smoke and pass this bill.
I truly believe 60% of our guests smoke. They're comfortable there. And this is going to hurt us.
The Senate passed their version of the bill yesterday. Representative Stacey Reese, sponsor of House Bill 426, says it's time for the House to do the same.
If we don't listen to the healthcare groups, we don't listen to our business groups, and we don't listen to our colleagues and our constituents, I hope we at least listen to the 200,000 children in Georgia that said, stop it.
And Chairman Cooper says she's not trying to derail or stop the bill from moving forward. She says she plans to have the committee vote on House Bill 426 as early as next week. Reporting live, I'm Chris Knight for Lawmakers.
Thank you very much, Chris.
Well, the Senate Reapportionment and Redistricting Committee this afternoon reviewed plans to revise the state congressional maps, but did not vote on the measure. While Senate Republicans say the plan creates more uniform boundaries, Democrats charge Republicans with political trickery.
I think if you look at this map, it doesn't maximize anybody's partisan advantage because we're not pairing incumbents. We're giving congressmen, even though they're not required to live in their own district. This map, as you can see here, is not drawn to remove anybody that's currently in Congress out of Congress. But I think just on face value, it's a map that does a lot better job of putting counties back together, putting communities of interest back together, and we hope that the majority of the senators will agree with us.
When the shoe is on the other foot, you know, this is the people's business. They're telling us this is a good thing to do, and it's not a good thing. We ought to be worried about people's health care, people's education, people's public safety, not about drawing maps so politicians can get reelected easier.
The Senate Reapportionment and Redistricting Committee vote on Senate Bill 214 could take place as early as tomorrow.
Well, it's time to check in with Tom Crawford, national editor of CapitolImpact.com. I began by asking Tom why he thought House Bill 218 was tabled during today's Senate debate.
They lost some of their votes, Gerald. I understand the Republicans thought they had the 29 or 30 votes they needed to pass it going into today's debate. Some of those votes peeled off. Several of them, I believe, were freshman Republicans, and they realized about halfway into the debate
that the votes weren't there to pass it, so rather than suffer a defeat, they decided to put the bill on the table.
Which is typically what happens when the majority party starts counting heads in the middle of a debate and finds that they don't have enough votes. What typically happens next?
Well, the Republican leadership obviously will call in some of the folks who've been wavering on this and see if they can do some friendly persuasion to get them to change their votes and vote for it. And if they get to the point where they think they've got a majority, it's a simple matter to take the bill off the table and bring it up for a vote again. We're just not sure when that will be.
A lot of discussion today as the bill was debated on the media, on editorials against House Bill 218, which led Senator Jeff Mullis, who's chairman of the Economic Development Committee, to actually suggest that perhaps journalists or members of the media should register as lobbyists. I'm not sure if he's serious about that or not.
Well, let's hope that he was being funny about it, but there was opposition in the media all over the state, not just the Atlanta newspapers, which of course is everybody's favorite whipping boy. You even had conservative newspapers like the Rome News Tribune. They were very upset about this bill, whether that was justified or not. And I think a lot of the legislators, especially the younger ones, were getting that backlash from back home, and they were a little nervous about voting on it.
Let's move to another House bill, this one that passed out of the House this week, and that is the abortion bill that requires a 24-hour waiting period for women seeking abortion, plus some mandatory reading matter for them. The way the AJC played this one was the applause that came after that, and Speaker Richardson even admonished people for applauding and breaking decorum. Tell us a little about that bill.
That is a bill that the Right to Life people have been trying to bring up for a House vote for years. They could never do it under the Democratic leadership because they tended to keep the bills bottled up in committee. With the new Republican majority, that became one of their top priorities, and it did come out of committee, and it was approved by a very decisive margin yesterday. Now, some of the features of the bill that had been perhaps a little bit too strong for some people's taste were taken out in committee, but it does place some limitations on abortions, and the Right to Life people hope it will make fewer people decide to have that procedure.
Another part of the governor's education package, Senate Bill 35, the so-called flexibility bill, passing out of the Senate, but with objections from Democrats.
Democrats feel that the bill is going to harm education because it basically allows local school systems to go for another 2 years without reducing class sizes as is required under the Education Reform Act. Republicans say that the local schools need this flexibility, but Democrats claim it's going to help our efforts to improve children's education.
Another educational issue, some tweaking of the Hope Scholarship Program in the House, and there's a bill that Democrats have been saying since the beginning of the session that they think the Hope Scholarship Program is in trouble under Republican leadership, and this bill sort of limits the scope of Hope.
It does. It provides that after you have received 127 credit hours in college, you can no longer receive Hope payments for tuition and books and fees. What this does in some cases, for example, with students who are working on an engineering or a pharmacy or a nursing degree, those take more than 127 hours. And there was some concern among the Democrats that this is going to hurt the kinds of people that we need to get those degrees and stay in Georgia.
Well, the House today agreed to restrict asbestos and silica claims. House Bill 416 would require plaintiffs to provide a medical affidavit verifying that a condition or death arose from asbestos or silica exposure. It would also require that the claim be filed in the jurisdiction where the action took place. Representative Wendell Willard asked the bill's sponsor how suits would be handled for contract laborers who often work in multiple locations.
It does allow the trial court to make an inquiry as to the location of the occurrence or the exposure to the asbestos.
And the question there is that there may be places that there was exposure. And so it may not just be that one building, but many places throughout the country that could have happened.
And it would still allow for a trial court to make that determination because, as you well know, that would involve some complicated factual things that the court would have to deal with.
Representative Roberta Abdul Salam wanted to know whether the new statute of limitations would change the way suits could be filed on behalf of the deceased. Representative Ralston responds.
A state can bring that kind of case on behalf of the decedent, so that this bill doesn't change that. And in fact, we do have some specific protection in here for people who have, with pending cases on this issue of non-residents, to allow those cases where a physician certifies that it's expected that the person's going to die within the next year, then those cases will not be subject to the dismissal provisions.
Thank you. If that person has in fact died and the autopsy reveals that that's what the cause of death was, then the family can still file an action.
That's correct.
Thank you.
House Bill 416 passed without opposition and moves to the Senate. The House also voted to allow Wayne County to select its school board in nonpartisan elections. Senate Bill 132 was defeated by the House last week. Today, a motion by Representative Jeanette Jameson revived that bill, which passed by a vote of 149 to 1. It now goes to the governor's office. And finally, the House decided to give the Georgia Regional Transportation Authority greater leverage to buy buses. Representative Vance Smith explains.
This bill does two simple things. It exempts Greta from the sales and use tax when buying these buses for the express transit system. And secondly, it takes out the administrative requirement that each year they go and have an annual certification from the DMVS.
House Bill 281 passed 151 to 1 and moves to the Senate.
The Senate voted today to create a commission to study early learning projects in Georgia. Here's Senator Brian Kemp.
All the studies show that a child's brain develops at a critical time from birth to 3 to 4 years of age. And what this resolution is doing is setting a study committee of a group of very diverse folks to look at all early learning in Georgia, not just pre-K, but all early learning. Every program that's going on from Head Start, Even Start, Smart Start, just everything that's out there. And I got interested in this through seeing how much my young girls were learning when they were going to an early learning program at one of our local churches in Athens. But I know there's a lot of good state-funded programs, there's federal programs, there's private programs. One of the problems is, in my opinion, is that the General Assembly is not really up to date on exactly what's going on with a lot of these programs. Even though we do know a lot about early learning in Georgia, there's some of the nuts and bolts that we don't know. And we need to find those things out. We need to know what's working out there, what we're having problems with, where we need to expand, and this commission will look at that.
The Senate voted 49 to 0 to create the study commission. Senate Resolution 21 goes to the House.
Diabetes advocates lobbied at the Capitol today to raise awareness about this life-threatening disease and a law that would change insurance requirements. House Bill 83 would increase hospitalization coverage for small business employees, but spokespersons for the American Diabetes Association claim that it fails to provide for preventative disease management, which they say is less expensive and more effective in treating chronic diseases like diabetes.
Today we're here to speak with the legislators on the importance of sponsoring legislation that's pro-diabetes.
Here in Georgia, it's the 6th leading cause of death, killing more than 1,700 Georgians in 2003. The estimated cost of diabetes care, lost productivity, and premature death is $4 billion a year.
It is important that people understand that lifestyles, eating properly, eating healthy, exercising, we can all live normal lives if we knew what was going on with our bodies and how to prevent such things as the onset of diabetes, as well as making sure that we have the right information to know what to do when we need to do it.
There are currently nearly 500,000 diabetics in Georgia, though studies show that there could be as many as 250,000 who have never been properly diagnosed.
It was a spicy morning for many at the Capitol today as the Hispanic media were recognized for fostering political discourse among Georgia Hispanics. Lawmakers Michael Riddle has the story.
Hosted by the Hispanic Caucus, the Hispanic Media Day breakfast honored the Spanish language media for their coverage of the Capitol.
Today's the first day that we've ever formally welcomed the Spanish-speaking press to the state capitol.
We wanted to have a breakfast for the Spanish press, as well as mainstream press that covers Latino issues, as a way to thank them for what they're doing and keeping their readers, their listeners, and their viewers informed on what's happening at the Capitol.
The Hispanic media were introduced to legislators and lobbyists who thanked them for highlighting issues which were important to the Hispanic community.
House Resolution 256 is a constitutional ban on any public services for any undocumented immigrants, and they're also including K-12 education in that process, so that's of very serious concern to us.
The issues that have been facing the community recently have to do with immigration.
And for the most part, it's the view of Hispanic leaders and the press that we should have a federal reform of immigration law so that we get status for people that are working here and provide the labor force that big companies need in order to power their industries like poultry, textiles, and things of this sort. But the other issues that are important to the community are the bottom line issues: education, health care, transportation, because those are the issues that matter in daily life.
Nearly 750,000 Hispanics live in Georgia, and the Atlanta area alone has 7 Spanish newspapers, 5 radio stations, and 2 television networks. Reporting for Lawmakers, I'm Michael Riddle.
The General Assembly is considering legislation that could change the way that disabled citizens live. Over 1,000 Georgians with disabilities marched from the Capitol to the Freight Depot today to speak out against proposed Medicaid reductions. Lawmakers Angela Vondrasek was at the event.
Unlock the waiting list! Unlock the waiting list! Unlock the waiting list!
What you are doing here today, and I fervently hope for the rest of the year, what you are doing is making sure that the voices of people with disabilities are heard in your government.
Many people here today are concerned with the cap that may be placed on the Independent Care Program waiver. This cap could increase the chances of disabled citizens being moved from their own homes into a nursing home.
No cap for ICWP!
During this legislative session, we have seen a budget with increased support to get individuals off the waiting list. We have seen continued concerns about premiums for those who receive the deeming waiver and potential caps for the independent care waiver program that might force some people back into nursing homes.
Unlocking the waiting list would allow more Georgians to receive home and community-based services. Reporting for Lawmakers, I'm Angela Vondrasek.
Well, coming up tomorrow on Lawmakers, the Senate takes up a House resolution that would rename the Legislative Office Building in honor of the late U.S. Senator Paul Coverdell. And Capitol Hill Independent Baptist Ministries holds a rally at the Capitol calling for Georgia to prohibit homosexuals from adopting or providing foster care for children. We'll have those stories and all the latest from Under the Gold Dome. That's tomorrow at 7 p.m. If you missed any part of this broadcast, tune in when Lawmakers is rebroadcast tomorrow morning at 5:30 on GPB. Just a reminder for those of you with access to the Internet, you can watch Lawmakers online. Lawmakers is streamed live and then archived on our website every night that we're on the air. Coming up tonight at 10 p.m., State of the Arts. This Georgia Public Broadcasting exclusive art series features art and artists from Georgia. This quarter, the program features playwright, poet, journalist, and author Pearl Clegg. The art of ice sculpting, a visit to the Albany Museum of Art, the golden age of comic books, and some toe-tapping bluegrass music. That's all on State of the Arts tonight at 9 p.m., only here on Georgia Public Broadcasting. Now, stay tuned for Prep Sports Plus. That program is coming up next right here on GPB.
And that is our broadcast for this, the 24th Legislative Day of the Georgia General Assembly. I'm Gerald Bryant.
And I'm Wendy Lawson. For all of us here at Lawmakers, good night.
This has been a production of Georgia Public Broadcasting.